And we are live again in the studio. And this time, finally, we are joined by David from Nike. David, welcome in the podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. And as you guys can see, if you're watching, and I very highly encourage you to watch this episode on YouTube, we have a lot of cool shoes on the table. Of course, there are Nike shoes, there are running shoes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So maybe, David, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself first so people can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Belgium, where quite quickly I got into track and field. Spent quite some time on the track training for the decathlon. Which is 10 events in 2 days, as we just figured it out. So I moved to the Netherlands to study at university, and then I was lucky enough to get an internship position within Nike in product and in running. So this is why probably you have me here today talking about all those goodies on the table.
Yes.
I spent 1 year working with running products, which is quite fun because you also you're able to see product much more in advance versus when they launch on the market. So you can see all the prototypes, work with them. It's really interesting. And then now I'm still within Nike, not an intern anymore. I'm working there full time, and then I'm taking care of digital journey on all the digital platforms for Nike. I used to be also in running, and now I'm moving towards performance in general. So I'm going to tackle other sports as well, like
awesome.
Training and football and basketball and all of that stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. So just to quickly go through, what do we have today on the table for people watching again? Listeners, I really encourage you to watch again. What did you bring us today on the table? What do we have here? So
I brought you samples of what is probably some of the best running shoes you can find on the market today.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this, you might think I'm biased, but
yeah, I was thinking that.
yeah, exactly. But I like to believe that I'm not. For example, I was in Berlin for the European Championships, track and field. It was 2 years ago, and the guy who won, he was a New Balance sponsored athlete. And what he did was he took that 4%, the Vaporfly 4%, which is basically the first time we had a radical innovation in long distance running footwear. And he painted the New Balance logo over the shoe, because he was not allowed to wear, of course, a Nike shoe as a New Balance sponsor athlete. Yeah. So in that sense, I like to believe I'm not that biased, and this is actually some of the coolest shoes you can find. But I guess we're going to go into detail for all of them, right?
We want to talk first maybe about what Nike is offering and the evolution of the Nike racing footwear.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, I started running with this one, which is the Pegasus 31. What was the Pegasus 31 back in the days, and since then, so much has been done, and we've seen with Breaking 2 a lot of evolution in the Nike footwear, and now like the pro fast models and more everyday kind of shoe. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the evolution of this line of racing shoes?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think if you look at the history of marathon running, because those shoes are primarily made for long distance running, right? So we tend to go towards marathon. And if you would type marathon running shoes into Google, you probably have two very different type of footwear coming up. The first one, and it's what has been on the market for the last probably 40 to 50 years, are those very, very light with a very thin rubber sole. And the big idea at the time was that if you can make the shoe as light as possible, probably you can run the fastest, right? And it went like this for 40 to 50 years without really any radical innovation since the 70s or the 80s. And then with Breaking 2 and with the 4%, the Vaporfly 4%, that was the first time that truly you had disruptive technological innovation in long distance running footwear for a couple of things. So maybe if we look at the Vaporfly 4%, which was again the first shoe that really brought something different to the table when it came to long distance running. There's 3 things here that are quite important and quite radical. The first one is the upper. So the upper is called fly mesh, and it's just a fancy name for an improved upper. What it means is just that it's very light, it's quite flexible, quite durable. It's the least important of the 3 characteristics that are making that shoe, but it's still important to mention it. One of the cool things that they did with this one is they put a carbon plate inside. So you don't see it, but it's there. It's really stiff, and it's basically physics, right?
So that was the first time they did that?
Yeah, exactly. That was the first time that they put a plate, at least in the long distance running shoe.
All right.
I think there were some prototypes made by other companies back in the days for sprinting spikes, for example. But in long distance running shoe, it was the first time, at least mass marketed. And the idea is very simple. If you have a stiff plate in your shoe, which is as light as carbon can be, and you put some pressure on it, you're going to bend it, and then its energy return is going to propel you forward. So that was the first thing. But actually, the key innovation in this shoe is coming from the foam. The foam is called Pegasus, or it was renamed Zoom X by Nike. And basically, what it is, it's a foam that is typically used in airplane insulation. And it is much more lighter, much more bouncier, and much more squishier than the traditional foam that you can find in running shoes. And the consequence of that is that you have the best propulsion to weight ratio in the world when it comes to a running footwear. And to give you a bit of an idea, the energy return on this one is about 85%, that's insane. Which is massive.
That's right? A lot.
And those you put those 3 together, so the mesh, the carbon plate, and the Zoom X foam, and this is what you get. You get the Vaporfly 4%.
Yeah.
85% energy return means only 50% is lost. Like 85% is giving back from the shoe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because the foam, you say it's squishier, and like squishier means only like a nice landing, but also like bouncing, like same as with the carbon.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea with that foam is that it has a certain shape. And when you run, you're going to compress that shape.
Yeah.
And when it goes back to its original state, it
gives
propels you forward, right?
Yeah.
Much more than a traditional foam.
Yeah.
And for the people who don't know what Breaking 2 was the event organized by Nike. I can't remember the year. Was
2017.
17, right?
I believe, yeah.
It was in on the racetrack in Monza, Italy, where 3 athletes tried to break the 2 hours wall in the marathon, which has never been done in the past. Up until recently, actually.
Yeah.
And so that was what happened, and they had that shoe actually made tailor-made actually for those 3 athletes.
Yeah, exactly.
So they did actually prepare not only the event and the goal of breaking the 2 hours, but also all the technology and everything. They did all of that for that event. So that shoe is basically what comes out of this as a technological advancement, innovation.
Exactly. And if you ask me, I think it was one of the best marketings that ever pulled in the running world.
I agree.
But that was actually pretty cool, because I think it was also very Nike-like, very focused on innovation and pushing the status quo and pushing the boundaries a little bit further. But indeed, and I think it's also a good bridge to one of the critics that the shoe received, and maybe I can spend just a little bit time on the name. So
sure.
Vaporfly 4%, you might ask yourself why is it called 4%, right? And so to give you a little bit of context, the University of Colorado Boulder and Nike partner up together to make a research on how much this shoe is actually helping you run faster. And what they figured out is that with this shoe, your oxygen intake when you're running was 4% less than with other traditional running shoes. And those 4% in oxygen intake would translate into between 3 and 4% efficiency in running. So basically, you would lower your running time by 3 to 4%.
Okay.
That's why it was called Vaporfly 4%. Now, there was some critics going on with that naming and that 4%, and we can quickly touch on it. But first of all, it was funded by Nike, right? So you might ask yourself, is it biased or not?
Of course.
To that argument, I like to say, well, if you understand how scientific research is made, probably you don't have an argument anymore, because it was very thorough research and very well thought research. However, they only used runners that could run 10 kilometers in less than 31 minutes. So you're dealing with professionals here. You're dealing with elite athletes.
Yeah.
So the first question that you must ask yourself of, well, does that efficiency, 3 to 4% efficiency, does it also translate into people who are maybe just a little bit more normal and not pro athletes and not elite athletes? So that was the first one. And the second one is that when they made the research, it was basically 6 times 5 minutes trials on a treadmill. And based on that, they calculate those 3 to 4%. But it's not very clear how that efficiency translates into long distance marathon. And on top of that, it was a control environment, right? So people were running on a treadmill. You're not sure how that efficiency also translates in maybe more humid conditions or things like that. And I think the key one here is the translating 5 minutes treadmill to a marathon. Because if indeed those shoes would make you run 3 to 4% faster, then if you look at the marathon running time at the time, that would actually mean that, a sub 2 hour marathon is fairly easily reachable, which we all know is not the case.
Yeah.
And that brings us also to Breaking 2. And I think one of the key points here is with Breaking 2 is to understand that although this shoe is what we can kind of consider magical. I don't know if you ever had the chance to run with one of them on your feet.
Not the Vaporfly. No. The Zoomfly I have.
Okay,
yeah, that's the one actually I have it here. I can show it. But that wasn't my budget back then. Because they're also expensive shoes.
Yeah.
But for my use, I was very happy with this one. So the Zoomfly was also a product from the Breaking 2. Yeah. If I remember right, there was the Vaporfly, that was the Premium Pro shoe. And they also then did the Zoomfly, and they also adapted then the Pegasus also with a new design. Yeah. So that was what I tried, but I never tried the Vaporfly. No,
it's a very special feeling. Maybe we can have you put one of them on your feet just to feel what it's like.
I will. I did that in the shop actually already.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So I never tried it on a treadmill or outside.
But so it really feels a little bit magical. It gives you that extra kick. It just feels like you're running on clouds and it's propelling you forward. It's incredible. But I do have to say, and you can see that with the Breaking 2 attempt, it's just one of those numerous characteristic of running a race, right? And there's so many other things that are so important in order to be able to get to that 3 or 4% increase in running efficiency. I'm thinking DNA, like what's your lactic threshold? What's your VO2 max? What is your nutrition plan? How are you hydrating yourself? Training plans. The race setting. Do you have wind? Do you not have wind? All of that was really well done at Breaking 2 because of the Monza. So you had the least amount of turns possible. Yep. They controlled the weather, so they made sure that the temperature was optimal. All of these things, and yet only Eliud Kipchoge was able to get close to that 2 hour mark. I think he ran 2:25 or 2:24, something like this.
Just past the 2 hours. Yeah. So which was still very impressive.
Yeah, it was
still is actually, but yeah,
for sure. But it shows that there's much more to that than
the shoe is just one setting. Yeah, it's a big one, but it's just one setting among the other ones. Yeah, for sure.
And I tend to say that if you really want to improve your running by 4 or 5%, you can try to wear the shoe, but there's probably many other things you can do before in order to get to that point. Yeah,
I think the shoe is also a big motivation. Having new gear, having new technologies. It's like, especially for me back then, I was not extremely motivated when I really started running. And for me, buying a new pair of shoes, buying a new jacket, a new t-shirt would be a motivation for me to just go out and enjoy it. And for shoes, I think it's the most exciting because having a fresh pair of shoes on your feet, it's the best feeling,
Well,
especially if
you can feel it directly.
You
That's
feel
the
it
thing.
directly, especially when you have, and like I mentioned, the Zoomfly when I bought it, I felt it right away, the difference.
Mhm.
It was really pushing me forward. And I was like, wow, is it just me because I saw all the marketing and the explanation? So is it in my head or do I really feel it? But no, it was real. I really felt it. And I think it's really a great motivation to push it forward. And maybe I gain 4% more in speed, but definitely more motivation for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think getting a new pair of shoes is one of the things that's just, it makes you just, want to put your running gear on and go outside and go for a run. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I actually had a running coach a few years ago that said, even if it's just a headband or something, get some new gear every 2 to 3 months. So just to motivate yourself to go outside and try it and be like this little kid again.
Yeah, no, that's a good one for sure.
I want to come back on this because we used to have running shoes that were very, very, very thin sole. Yeah. And now we see, if we want to take the latest one of the latest one, we see a very thick sole.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Is this really better? Is there a real difference with those bulky shoes? Because we see a trend with whether it's Nike, but also all the brands are also doing this right now.
And especially with running, you try to be as light as possible. And now when we get thicker soles, like not professional like me, would
it looks heavy, but if you guys could have this shoe in your hands, you would be amazed how light it is.
Exactly.
It's incredible. I feel like I have nothing in my hand. So I have the Alphafly in my hand, by the way. So for people listening. So yeah, there's this trend of having bulky shoes. There's a lot of conversation as well as we're probably going to touch this a little bit later, but technological doping.
Yeah.
Until what point is it still something that we can accept? There's now regulations as well, but so yeah, this trend of we have it here on the screen, but from lightweight to bulky.
Yeah. So the idea really is what we mentioned already with the evolution of marathon running shoes. The idea was, I'm gonna make my shoe as light as possible, which means I'm gonna make the sole as thin as possible, so I can run the fastest. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, what if I make a bulky shoe? But the advantage that I get out of making that bulky shoe outweighed the disadvantage of maybe the little bit of extra weight. And that's exactly what they did by using this Pegasus foam or using this plate. Because this foam is so light, you have a shoe, as you mentioned, that is quite bulky. It's quite massive when you look at it and you have it in your hand. It feels like it's almost like a brick.
Yeah.
But the foam is so light that
it is.
Even if it does look bulky, you still end up with a shoe that is pretty close in terms of weight to what used to be done. But now you have the added benefit of the foam that is compressing on itself and then that is propelling you forward when you're actually running. So that was a little bit the idea. And what I like about this is sometimes we take things for granted, and you do something for 20, 30, 40 years, or you're born and everybody tells you, well, this is what a running shoe looks like. Until one guy actually comes up and says, hey, what if we do it differently? Can we actually bring it one step further? And this is what happened with the 4% and then the evolution of the shoe. And this is also what you can see from the Vaporfly 4% to the Vaporfly Next percent to the Alphafly Next percent. You see evolution like bit by bit to try to make that shoe more efficient. And that also translates into a little bit more bulky, because the bulkier the sole, the more energy return you're going to get out of it. Yeah. So if we look, for example, so we covered the Vaporfly 4% already, but this one is then the Vaporfly Next percent. It's called Next percent because it's supposed to be the next one after the 4%. So little story, when this was developed as a prototype, the idea in Nike's mind was to call that the 5%.
Yeah, I was wondering why not just doing 5?
Exactly. So for different reasons, the first one is that that depending on who is wearing the shoe, the running efficiency can range from, let's say, through 3% to about 6%.
But this is the same true for the 4%.
Yes, it's just that I think the variance within the results were a little bit bigger for this one.
Okay.
So they decided to just go and call it next percent. And I think another reason was, if you call the next one the 5%, then probably you need to call the next one the 6 and the 7 and the 8.
And at one point you're at 100. What do you do then?
Exactly. And then it raises also the question, well, is that something we want to have on running races? So yeah, and if you look at this one, I think there's a few difference between the 4% and the next percent. The first one is the upper. So what used to be fly mesh is now called Vaporwave. And
it looks plasticky.
Yeah, it does look plasticky, but it's extremely, extremely lightweight. It's also weather resistant. So it's, we were talking about humid conditions. If you run in the rain with this one, it's going to be much more efficient than if you run with the 4%. The added difference is also that you obviously still have the carbon plate inside that is propelling you forward, but they also increase the amount of foam in the shoe. So we have about 15% more foam in the next percent than in the 4%, which is giving you that extra energy return, which is why it's a little bit more efficient that we have found before. And then they also increase a little bit the grip on the sole. So that makes you run a little bit faster.
Yeah. Then again, for the weather purposes, I assume to have with nearly all weather conditions a better grip.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you can see the shoe is looking more aerodynamic than the previous one. So they also had some work on design.
But is this just look or actually also performance more aerodynamic? Because I was thinking like the tip in the end, it goes a little bit more up. So it looks definitely very speedy. Is this design or is this function?
It's both, right? So of course there is always a function behind the design, but at Nike we like to make the shoe look really cool. So this is it goes together.
This is a must. Yeah,
exactly. It goes together. And there also one little thing that was different from this one, from the next percent to the 4%, is the lacing. So the lacing is sideways, and the reason that was implemented is because of blood circulation in the foot. So if you have sideways laces, the blood circulates much more naturally in the foot than if you don't. So that's like, little things like this that makes it the 5%, air quotes.
Yeah, these are things that were, now when you tell me, I would be like, what? Like we were talking about that you two are a little bit shoe nerds, especially when it comes to Nike. And I'm like the absolute newbie, no idea what I'm talking about. That's why maybe I'm also so quiet. And like I'm hearing these things and it makes sense. Like if you explain it to me, I would be like, oh, that's cool. But it's like, I would not even think about it. But that's why these are also high elite running shoes and not me Sunday runner 10K shoes.
Exactly, yeah.
And then fast forward, we are at
the Alphafly. This is probably the coolest thing that I've seen in the running world in a very, very long time. So again, looking back, we had the 4%, we had innovation going to the next percent, then they took the next percent and they said, what else can we do? Well, as you can see, they also added a little bit more foam on top of it. But the extra, the difference here and the extra kick out of that shoe is the airbags. So, as before, you had propulsion that was coming from basically two things. That was the carbon plate and the foam. Here, you still have the foam, you still have the carbon plate, but they added those airbags on the forefoot. And it's again, it's the same physics principle, right? So you have those airbags. When you run, you compress them, and when you move forward, those goes back into their initial state, making you move forward and propelling you propelling
forward,
you forward.
That's crazy, but it's so bulky, and the fact that the first part of the shoe here, the tip, is open and you can see those airbags also as well. It's like very aggressive design. Yeah. And also a little bit of legacy from the Air Max a little bit, with this visible air bubble.
Exactly.
I like this a lot. And this hole in the middle, top middle of the shoe here, where you can see
you can see the carbon plate.
You can see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You can
So,
have it here.
but this one also has, it's not only the further development of the racing shoe, but it also has a special history because,
Exactly. So this is a very, very, very special model. And the reason is that, whereas we had Breaking 2 attempt with Eliud Kipchoge and Vaporfly 4%, this was a little bit the second trial with the Ineos Challenge in Vienna not that long ago.
Yep.
And with this shoe, it was the first time that a human being was capable of running a marathon sub 2 hours. To this day, it is still considered one of the greatest sporting achievements ever. Quite like the first time somebody climbed Mount Everest or things like this. It's really, if you look at the split and if you look at what it takes to be able to run a marathon sub 2 hours, it's pretty incredible. And this shoe, is one of the factors that made it happen. So it has a very special place in the footwear, running footwear history, let's say. Yeah.
And you were saying it already yourself, like, so next model, next innovation, a little bit more foam and a little bit more foam. And I remember that when we actually, or when not we, but Kipchoge broke the sub 2 hours, it was just before the Olympics were planned to happen. And then there were this entire discussion going on of, are these shoes allowed? Are they not allowed? And how far can we go? Because is the innovation, does it mean we just add a little bit more foam every time that we do? Yeah. I'll let you talk.
No, exactly. And that's a good point. And it's leading to one of the topic that I think is very interesting and divides people a lot. And it's mechanical doping, right? How far can you take a shoe and still have it considered as normal or as okay to wear in a race? And also a little bit of story time here. I told you this one was supposed to be called the 5%.
Yeah.
This one, I actually had a prototype in my hand about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When it was still in development. And at that time, they were thinking about calling it 8%.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the amount of energy return that you might expect from that shoe.
All right.
And, at the time also, sorry, there were double airbags. So you had you didn't have only 2 airbags in the forefoot, but you had 4.
Yeah.
And then you also didn't have just 1 plate. You had 3 carbon plate inside.
Yeah.
And that led to your point to people really questioning: is this okay? Can we put this onto people's feet and have them run? With research showing that this can actually lead you to run 7 to 8% faster. And this is when the IAAF, which is the athletics, the Worldwide Athletics regulatory body
institution
came in and said, okay, we have to put a framework, we have to put some regulations around it just to make sure that it doesn't go too far. So now one of the cool things that was implemented is that prototypes are not allowed anymore. So as a pro athlete, you cannot run a race with a shoe that has not been on the market for everybody to purchase for at least 4 months.
Yeah. Now, if you say it out loud, it actually makes sense, because then at least everyone could buy it beforehand and train with it. Yeah.
And at least you have somewhat of an equal level playing ground, because if you want to, you can get that pair of shoes.
Yeah.
It still tends to be quite limited into the amount of units that we put out there on the market. But this shoe that Eliud broke the 2 hours marathon barrier with, everybody can purchase it online, right? So that was one of the first thing that they implemented. The second thing is, actually, to your point, is about the thickness. So now no running shoes with a thickness of more than 40 millimeters are allowed for racing.
And 40 millimeters sole we are only talking
sole,
about. Yeah,
exactly.
That's for one size, precise size, I think.
Yes, it's for the, I believe it's size 10.
Size 10, I think. Yeah, that's the standard.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing is for the carbon plate itself. So a shoe is only allowed to have one and only one plate. So the prototype that I was telling you earlier with like 3 different carbon plates, that's something that is in today's world would never go through on an actual race. Yeah.
Could they still put this on the market for the public, just for fun in a way, like not for official competition, but for people who want to have something a little bit different? Because they could theoretically, if it's not in a race, used in a race.
Fair enough.
There's not a lot of point in doing this because it's a professional shoes, also expensive one that will be used basically for training, but then not being used for. So yeah,
exactly.
I'm answering my question myself. Actually, yeah.
It's a little bit like asking,
collectors. I don't know.
Yeah. But then I think collecting is also linked to certain events or certain things.
Yeah.
And if it's just a shoe that is pretty cool, but that nobody can use anyway, it's a little bit like as a private person owning a Formula One car and not being able to take it on the highway, right? It's
true.
It's cool, but is it really worth it?
I would collect the prototype though.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But it's actually the whole mechanical doping question is very interesting because I think it's a debate that is worth having, and I don't know what your guys' point of view is on this one, but I do think that there is a need for people to evolve with the technology, and I also think it tends to be a little bit of a hypocrite thing sometimes going on because if you look at sports in the last maybe 15, 20 years, the way it evolved, if you look at boxing, for example, we went from traditional boxing to MMA. If you look at the Tour de France with cycling, it's always longer, it's always more intense. People want to see record, people want to see things moving fast. They just, they come for a show.
Yeah.
And then you need to accept that human capabilities, despite what Eliud Kipchoge usually tends to say,
is
right?
limited.
Yeah, well, he's in the mindset, he's right, but in terms of physics, it's you have very finite capabilities.
There's a wall,
right?
Yeah,
there's a wall that you can reach. No human is ever going to run 6 seconds on 100 meters, right? That's not going to happen. So either you agree that sports might not be that intense and that interesting in terms of chasing records all the time, especially when it comes to marathon running, or then you need to allow technology to support that, that evolution and that,
go with it.
And go with it. And I think what the IAAF is doing by setting a framework and a set of rules within which to evolve is quite nice. But what I don't want to see is in 50 years from now that we still run in the same running shoes a marathon. I think that would be a little bit of a hypocrite thing going on. It's a very interesting question. I think a lot of people have different opinions about it.
I think you have a point here. And since there's this obvious wall, the limitation of the human body, the physics, maybe we can imagine having a special category for people wearing very advanced technological shoes and props and gear. And that would be a category in itself. And then we would have eventually normal, regular running shoes with limited technological advancements.
But then this special category, you're basically winning if you have the best sponsor and partner to work with.
Well, I would say, it depends because you will also have regulations. You will not have rollerblades or, it's like still a running shoe. So you don't have propulsions or anything not motorized but I don't know.
What I'm asking myself is not why not giving everyone the best shoe? Like have every person that takes part in it, is registered for the race, just give them the same shoe. Of course, I know you have to train with them beforehand, so otherwise.
No, but there's just a lot like the sponsorships, the brands, and
it's probably the discussion is then how do you define the best shoe?
Also, what the best shoe for you is maybe not the best shoe for someone else.
And I think that's what they try to fix by having no prototypes allowed and having the shoes, needing to be on the market for at least 4 months. It's a way to kind of go into that direction, right? I think it's very difficult before a world championship to say, hey, everybody is going to wear the same pair of shoe. But what you can do is say, well, at least they're available for everybody to purchase if you want to. But yeah, and to your point, I think we are going somewhat into that direction, not necessarily having a specific category when it comes to crazy footwear innovation. But if you look at Breaking 2 and if you look at the Ineos challenge, these are not official marathon races. And yet it was attracting a lot of viewership and yet it's still considered one of the best thing ever to happen in sport because you broke a true sporting barrier by running a marathon sub 2 hours. But it's not an official world record.
It's not, no.
So I think there's a way to combine both moving together. And there's also another argument that, because people are always expecting more and they want to see more and they want to see something more intense and records like every 2 seconds, maybe if you allow technology to enable that, then you might also minimize the incentives of actual doping within the athletes. I know it's very easy to say, and it's probably not like this, but there's also this aspect to it that is quite interesting.
Yep.
And
I agree.
One of the things also that we need to make sure that everybody understands is this shoe is not creating more energy than the runner is creating itself.
Yep.
So what we're trying to do with this shoe is, if the runner is creating a certain amount of energy with his running, what we try to do is get as close as possible to giving back 100% of that energy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we're getting closer and closer, but there's not a motor in it. There's not an engine. We're not creating additional energy than what the runner is creating itself.
It's recycling the energy put inside.
Yeah, it brings us back to what we, I think, said earlier. The 4%, it would not make me 4% quicker because, it's really for the high top-notch people, and you have to have certain athleticism standards that make you fast anyway to have this little like wheel making you even just a little bit faster than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also goes very, very closely to running form and running technique. People who tend to be elite runners, they have a certain way of running. They practice for 10, 15, 20 years sometimes. Yeah. So they perfected the way they're running, which is usually leaning forward, is quite aggressive. And you can see that in the design of the shoe, right? If you put the shoes on without doing anything, you're going to just naturally lean forward because the drop is quite aggressive. The shoe itself is quite aggressive. If you're somebody who's running, 5:30 or 6 minute kilometer pace, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like everybody has their own pace, but that shoe then might not give you what it will give to somebody who's running a 2:45 or 2:50 pace on a 10K, for example.
Yeah,
for
with
sure.
Perfect form. So, well, now that we have these certain regulations that it's not allowed to be then more than 40 millimeters thickness of the foam, there's not more allowed to be more than one plate. Do they also define the length of the plate or the thickness of the plate, or does it actually also not have an effect on it? Well, maybe too much in detail, but what do you think is then still possible? Because now it, again, being here more the less nerd on this table, I'm kind of thinking like, well, okay, seems like there's nothing new being able to come because you're basically regulated.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. And this is also what we see with the Vaporfly with this shoe. You can always add a little bit of this and a little bit of that to make it slightly better. But this is, in my opinion, as good as it gets and as good as it will probably get within that set of regulation and within that framework that was imposed by World Athletics, at least for the next couple of years until there is somewhat of a shift in mindset. So it's an excellent question to ask. Well, what's next, right? Mm-hmm. Probably there is going to be some sort of evolution of that shoe. But I think the most interesting points when it comes to what's next are going to be on maybe different areas than the true racing shoe in itself. Mm-hmm. And we see it happening already. So, for example, one of the cool things that is happening at the moment is that they take some technological part of that shoe that was created and they put it into very different models with very different purposes. So you will start to see, the plate into models that are not made 100% for marathon racing, like the Zoom Fly. It's still very aggressive, right? But it's a shoe that can be used for tempo runs or track session or things like this. And then also the foam. So this Zoom X foam, for the first time ever, we have it in a different franchise, in a different family. So last week we launched this model, which is the Zoom X Invincible. It's part of the Fearless family, and this shoe is basically made for everyone.
Fearless family is race family?
No. So Zoom family is what we consider the racing family.
Yeah.
And the Fearless family is basically, it's a range of shoes that is made for everybody to go on long runs.
Yeah.
It's to do your 15Ks on a Sunday, that kind of stuff. Like, this is the shoe to use it with. And for the first time, we see technological aspect of the Alphafly translating into a much more mass market style like this one. And I think that's the one of the first thing that we're going to see in terms of evolution. It's a little bit like cars. There's a lot of innovation that is made at Formula One level, and then they take some of that innovation and put it into mass marketed cars. This is exactly what you're going to see moving forward with the Nike offerings, and it's quite exciting because then you improve running for not just the people who are trying to run a marathon in sub 2:30 or 2:15, but for much more people. And so that's for the mass market styles. But then on the other extreme, you will see some of that technology translating into very specific parts of running and of track and field as well, just like spikes, for example. So here, this is a model that was launched a little bit earlier. It was like mid 2020.
Can you say the name quickly for everyone that's listening?
Yeah, so this one is the Air Zoom Victory. It was launched together with the Dragonfly. And again, it was the first time that you could see the Zoom X foam moving away from the Alphafly and the Next Percent and the 4% to a track and field model. And here you also have a carbon plate, and you have the same upper than on the Alphafly. So you really see that technology being used in much more diverse areas than just trying to run an extremely fast marathon.
Yeah.
So the third point of where it's moving is actually moving a little bit away from footwear and moving a little bit closer to apparel.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys remember, but what Nike did with the last Olympics is they worked a lot on those running suits, and they took the design of a golf ball that is usually flying through the air fairly easily, and they applied that to the shirts and the t-shirts and the shorts that the athletes were wearing, and I think you're going to see a lot of that as well. So I think I expect more innovation in the future coming from apparel than footwear, just because we're reaching already such a tipping point. Yeah.
Now I have a point in mind, because when you say this transition from the golf ball into apparel, I can hear a lot of people thinking very out loud, but this is all marketing. This is all design. This is all for us to buy more. And obviously, we know that Nike is amazing in marketing. They do amazing products. The designs are amazing. It's a big part of it. But then there's still behind a reason to do those things. It's not just for the fun and for the eyes. So they really adapt things. They do research in the background, and to apply those technologies that actually do something, do change something.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you look at the vision of Nike, it says that we try to bring innovation and inspiration to every athlete, and we define athlete as everybody with a human body.
Yeah.
So yes, marketing is there, and it's used to
it's important
to sell
as well,
products,
of course.
Yeah. And let's be honest, Nike is an excellent marketing brand, right? The way
one of the best for sure.
Yeah, the way they release the ads and the way they leverage the amazing athletes that we have is probably, in my opinion, one of the best when it comes to the sporting industry. But I can promise you that every single aspect of those shoes have been tested relentlessly in labs, whether it's in Oregon at the world headquarters or in different labs around the world. Like, just to give you an example, the airbags that you can find, whether it's in the Pegasus or whether it's in the latest, the Alphafly, there is a guy in the US that is literally spending all day, every day in the lab, creating different type of airbags, different shape, different thickness, different sizes, and testing what is the best for each model. It goes very, very far, right? There's also a lot of research made with scientists and people who have been in the sport industry for God knows how long. So what I do like about Nike shoes and Nike offerings in general is that, yes, there's a cool marketing implemented in order for the shoe to sell, but it is backed up by actual research and by actual innovation that does make you faster if you want to go faster, or that does make you less injured if you want to be less injured.
Yeah, happy that you actually mentioned that, because that was I did not really care about shoes before getting to know Kevin. I basically went into the shoe store, like the running shoe store, told him what I'm just doing, and they gave me a model, and as long as I liked the color, it was my shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm together with Kevin, I'm basically not, I'm only allowed to have Nike on my feet.
I never said that. But unofficially, it's the case.
And so I got this model that is for the injury prevention.
Yeah.
And I saw it in the store. And
you don't have this one. You don't have the Invincible Run. You have the normal React shoe, the React 2.
Okay, I'm sorry. I saw it in the store, and there was, of course, the marketing behind it, like tested that people are less injury prone. And I was like, that's cool. Like, this is like I was telling you before that I'm recovering from a running injury right now, which is probably not because of the shoe, but other issues. But still, like having people actually perform what they want to do, running, and helping them with a certain, it's cool. But there is this tiny voice in my head saying like, is this actually true? And is this actually like, with who did they test it? Like normal runners like me that get injured just by not run. Yeah. Can you tell us there a little bit more about this, especially this injury? I think it's a good initiative because it makes us run, but how applicable is it for everyday runners?
But is it really true, right?
Is it really true?
That's the question. Yeah. No, I'm happy to do that. So I think first of all, we need to understand a little bit the Nike offerings when it comes to running shoes. So you have 4 big families. The first one would be the Free. Those are like sometimes those weird shoes, and they look like a sock. And the Free shoes are made so that you can run about 20 to 25 minutes a week with those shoes. And because you're so close to the ground, it supposedly makes the little muscles in your feet much more stronger. So overall, like you increase strength in your feet when you run.
It's the closest you can have to barefoot.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the barefoot
but still
feel.
A good protection for the feet. And
exactly. Yeah. But again, you should never run 10K with those. You should run like 20 to 25 minutes every week. It strengthens your ankles and the small muscles in your feet. So that's the Free. Then you have the Joyride, which is basically a recovery shoe. It's the shoe you should wear on a Sunday when you go for a very slow run because you're tired from the week. And then we go into those 2 main family within Nike, which is the Zoom that we covered extensively so far. And then you have what used to be the React family and is now called Fearless. And it's exactly what you mentioned. So the idea behind the Fearless family is that, we look at the data and we look at the research, and there's this misconception and this myth about pronation. So I think for the last 40 years, when you go into a specialized running shop, they make you run in front of a camera, right? And then they look at how your feet goes on the ground. And then they say, well, you overpronate, so you need that type of shoe, or you underpronate, so you need that type of shoe. Great. Except that when you look at the data and you look at the research, there is actually no statistical significance. Like it's not been proven that by wearing a certain type of shoe because you overpronate or underpronate is going to make you less injured. So it's not backed up by any type of science.
Okay, so like because this is literally what I did. I went to the running store, they let me run in front of a camera, and they like had the side and I think the back view. Exactly. And then they said like, okay, whatever, these 3-4 shoes are fit for your running style. And then I just, as said, pick the one that I like the color the most.
Yeah, exactly. And
this is like not proven?
I'm not saying that it's not a shoe that is more tailored for you. Probably they are. But the question is that make you less prone to injury? Then the answer is no. It's not backed up by data. And it's not backed up by research. So at Nike, we said, well, what can we do to fix that? And research were made to kind of move away from that myth of overpronation and underpronation, and how does that influence your
risk of injury,
risk of getting injured. Exactly. And they realized that it's more about the actual stability of the shoe and about the foam in itself. So then the Fearless family was created exactly for that. And the shoe, if you can see it like on if you can actually look at it, it's very very large. It's a fat.
This one is
really
very
thick,
fat. Yeah.
very thick sole. And the idea behind that is no matter how you run, because going back to that point, I run very differently that you run and that Kevin runs probably. But if you bring that all together, because it's such a mass marketed shoe, with having that stability in mind and with having the Zoom X foam, which is very bouncy and very squishy, it will make you less prone to injury. And that has been researched, and I can quickly explain you how that was researched. So they took about 400 runners, if I remember correctly, and they had some runners wear this shoe, so the Zoom X Invincible. They had runners wear the Pegasus, so they also tested against other Nike shoes, and they had some other runners wearing, I think it was ASICS or Adidas shoes, something from the competition. And they looked at over, I think it was a period of 3 months, how many of those runners in each category wearing all those different shoes would come back to training 2 or 3 times in a week. And the idea is that, if you wear a Pegasus and you train Monday, Wednesday, and on Friday you don't come back, it's probably because you feel injured or you feel like something is not right. And by doing this, and it's staggering numbers, but by doing this, they actually proved that with this shoe, you're 42% less likely to get injured than if you would wear some other Nike shoe or a shoe from Adidas or ASICS or Brooks or whatever other brands is out there. So again, that's what I mentioned before. What I liked is that if there is such a statement as saying our shoes are making you less prone to injury, you can believe that is backed up by data. And by actual research, which is the case in this one. So yeah.
But was it then that people just did not go back to have a third run, or were they also like in question? I don't know if you know that much in detail. So please tell me if you're not. Or is it because people actually said like I don't feel fit to run? Because it could also be like there were a group of that tested that shoe that was very motivated, and the other groups were like a little bit more like maybe less motivated, a little lazier, or is.
So for sure, those are variables that you cannot really control, but that's when scientific research comes into the game. So everything is made so that you can control for those variables as much as possible, right? So first of all, it's the number of people. It's very unlikely that half of like the 150 people who wore a Pegasus versus an Invincible decided at the same time to not be motivated to go running, right? So the sample size and the controlling the variables is something that they do within the scientific research anyway, and everything is made so that the result that you get, you can be pretty certain that it's actually fairly accurate, right? You always have a risk in any research that you do. And now we go into statistics, but you always have a little bit of risk that it's not the case. But everything is made so that the result that you get, you can actually believe them, and especially when you have numbers as high as 52%, which is massive. Then you at least know that it's going in the right direction.
Like the 52% that you were saying, like that's 42. Sorry, still massive. Like
42, right?
52. I think
52.
52.
Okay, 52. Then sorry, my bad.
That's more than half. That's
a
crazy.
lot. That's a lot of change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then also like we discovered the fast. I'm sorry that I don't use the correct family names quite intensively. And now you explained 3 other families that they are. But looking already just on this table, there's like 6 pair of shoes. Like I'm just a regular Sunday runner. Like, okay, maybe twice a week, 3 times a week if I have a very good week. Like I'm like overwhelmed just going to the website, not being a nerd. Like especially since something like you mentioned before that there are certain visual aspects that that Nike is taking and implements in other models, but then are like 50, 60 euros cheaper. How can you, like in this jungle of shoes, find a shoe that is good for you?
You can invite me on your podcast. That's a start. No, but it's an excellent point, and we discussed this already beforehand. But indeed, Nike has this takedown design strategy where basically you take a shoe that is very performing and very expensive, and you try to make the rest of the shoe in the family look alike, as a way to sell it to the consumers. And although it is a very, very smart way to market your product, you also need to make sure that people do understand the differences and do understand the technology. And
because otherwise it's like literally two shoes that look very similar,
Exactly,
but have
yeah.
like a difference in price of, I don't know. Tell me of these ones.
I think if we look at the Pegasus, for example, it's about 120. This shoe is about 275.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most, but that's the top of the line as well. So
exactly.
that's
The top of the top.
Yeah. But that's also more of a, I would say, racing shoe.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
would not use it on my everyday runs, just, well, for once, because it's expensive, but also because that's something I would keep more for my really like my races.
Yeah.
And that's also something I wanted to mention. There is the Air Zoom Tempo Next Percent, which is basically
Looks
this
the same.
one, but more of a everyday training kind of shoe.
Exactly. And it's going back to the point that you were trying to make, is that at Nike, we don't try, at least when you train intensively for a goal, we're not going to try to push you one pair of shoe and say, this is the one for you. Every shoe is created with a very specific goal in mind. And the idea is that you create an ecosystem of pairs of running shoes that are fitting your goals, right? So you probably need one for your long runs, you need one for your tempo trainings, and you need one for racing. You can always say, well, are you just not trying to make me buy 5 pairs of shoes instead of one? To that, I would argue that you don't change a pair of shoes after 6 months because it's been 6 months. You replace it after a certain amount of mileage, because that's when the foam is not efficient anymore. So whether you have 5 or 1 over the long term, it doesn't matter, because if you're going to use different ones for different purposes, all in all together, you reach the same amount of money for miles that you put in, right?
Yeah. And it's also
but it's also nice to change the shoe.
Exactly.
To have different kinds, different models for different stimulation on the feet.
Chantal and Deline, they were telling us that for also injury prevention, it's very beneficial to rotate your shoes, not only because to let them rest, but also because different shoes, like if you actually have different models, train your run, your feet differently, which helps you stay overall trained and prevent injury.
Definitely, yeah. And going back to the point that you mentioned earlier, I think how can you make sure that you find the right pair of shoe for you is really, really difficult. And in full honesty, it's something that we're working on, especially in the digital space, because if you run into a store, and now with COVID, it's quite difficult to do so, but if you're actually able to run into a store and pick a Pegasus versus a Next Percent, you will feel the difference. At least you will get a sense of these are completely different shoes, even though they might look a little bit similar. But on a digital space, this is really tricky. And that's something that as a company, we need to improve. And there's a lot of work happening around that. I think for people who are listening, are wondering, well, what shoe fits me right now and how can I find that? I would say, Google is your gold mine. And there's so many different websites about like the very deep
analysis
reviews and analysis about the footwear that probably you can find what you're looking for. What I would say though is just if you're trying to go for very cushiony long runs, easy feel, I would look into the Fearless family, whether it's the React Miler, the React Infinity, or most recently the Invincible. If you go for a bit more tempo, a bit more faster pace, I would look into the Zoom models, all the way from the Pegasus to building up to the Alphafly if you're somebody who's racing for a marathon or even in 10K for that matter. It's not just marathon.
Or a collector.
Or a collector,
yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
How long does it take to make a shoe like this? Because I know for a fact that it's not just let's make a shoe and then in the few months afterwards it's made. There's a lot of, well, especially for the first models, but now still for the Alphafly, it's a long process in the making from we start the design, we have an idea, to it's delivered to the consumers.
Yeah.
How long does it take? Approx.
It really
will depend on the models, I guess.
Yeah, it depends on the models. For something as radical as the Vaporfly 4% or the Alphafly, for example, I think we are around 4 to 5 years in advance.
Wow.
So in terms of
What?
ideation, in terms of like the idea on a paper and how to translate into an actual shoe, it can take up to 4 to 5 years. So usually when I was working product, what we will have is on a yearly basis, you would get a brief from global, from the global headquarters, and they will say, hey, listen, in 4 to 5 years, we want to have a shoe that is going to answer that need and that need and that need.
Yeah.
And then you work together with them all the way to, I would say about 1 to 1.5 years before the product launches is the moment when you actually signed off on the design,
right?
The last touch-ups. For example, this thin, like if you look at the Zoom family of shoes at the back, they have this almost like shark fin kind of design. This used to be much more aggressive, so we're going to say, well, we're going to reduce that a little bit. Those last touch-ups are done about 1 year before the shoe goes on the market. But yeah, it can take a very, very long time.
So now you probably know what's coming up.
Yeah,
I know you probably cannot say a lot of things about this, but you already know about what's coming up next within those fast shoes.
You have a brief idea, and that's something that's for obvious reasons I cannot talk about. What I can tell you though, and that's something that is just never going to happen because of the IAAF regulations. But and we touched upon that before. But yeah, we had this idea about the Alphafly of having more than 2 Zoom bags and more than 1 plate. But that's also not going to happen just because of the new rules set up by the World Athletics. Yeah.
Excited to see what's coming next.
I'm excited to be in your brain and be hearing all the checklists that you receive from Global, what you're working towards too.
What I can tell you though is that the Fearless family, so the idea of having as many people out there as possible, no matter your level, running injury-free, that is going to take a lot of resource and a lot of time from Nike. That is really something that they're focusing on. Yeah.
Which is really nice. Kevin was talking with our unscared coach this week, and they were talking from CrossFit. With the physio, they were saying, like, especially now with Corona, sitting a long time and not moving that much, but still having free time. So then thinking like, okay, well, let's pick up running. They see a lot of injuries lately. So if there is some. And it's basically what makes you stop, because I was also like, at the beginning of this year in a very nice groove. Then I felt a little twitch and thought like, let's not wait. Let's directly go to the physio. Maybe it's just a little thing and I have to wait for a week and then I'm good. And he said like, no, you're down for a month. And I was like, oh, gosh. So
injuries are the worst.
Overcoming that, or like not overcoming, because we probably never overcome since there are so many different factors instead of only shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
That are leading to injuries, but reducing chances and educating people maybe along the way with products is something really nice.
No, and you mentioned a very important point. At Nike, we're not saying wear that shoe, you're not going to get injured, right? If you run stupid, you will get injured. Yeah. That's the idea.
Of course.
But at least if you do everything that you should be doing, it will give you an edge. It will make sure that, if you had a little bit chance of getting injured, maybe you don't, just because of the way the shoe was designed. But it's still very important to recover. It's still very important to understand how you should run, what the running form should be, what the efficiency should be, and if that means that you have to like look at videos online or maybe like book a session with one trainer a couple of times so that they can teach you how you should be running. Yeah. I think it's also something that is quite important that people should be looking at a bit more.
Yeah.
I would like to move on to the questions that we got from the audience, unless we forgot to mention something. But
yes,
I guess
some part that you think it's crucial for our listeners to know, like with this entire part that we now discussed.
I think we covered it all.
I think we covered well, a good amount of it. Yeah. So, question from the audience. That's something you guys, listeners or viewers, can easily do as well and participate. Drop your questions. Usually it's on Instagram, but you also have the possibility to record a voice message on speakpipe.com/whatthecrewpodcast. All links in the show notes. And we have the first question here from James Moorhan, which is a guest that we had on the podcast, fellow runners and CrossFitters. A CrossFitter, and he asked your favorite discontinued running shoe model. And I'm going to explain a little bit. James has, or at least had, a little bit of an obsession with the shoe that was called the Nike Air Zoom Elite, and Elite 8 in that case. That was a running shoe back in, I think, 2015 or maybe later. And he said that was his favorite running shoe ever. And that's why he asked this question: what is your favorite discontinued Nike running shoe?
Well, I'm going to make James very happy because it's mine as well. So
seriously,
So I have actually two shoes that are discontinued today that I used to love. The first one was the Tempo, but it was more for long runs.
Yeah.
So not the new Tempo, but the old one. It was part of the Lunar Lawn technology line. That was a very good one to go for like 10K. But yeah, spending a lot of time on the track, right? You need a shoe that is flexible enough, but also stable, that gives you like a right propulsion that you can do jumps with if you're training for the long jump, or working on stairs and things like this. And the Air Zoom Elite was just the perfect shoe. It was amazing, and actually I stocked a few of them back home just to make sure that I have them available, because we're never gonna get them from Nike again. But yeah, fully agree with James. I think this one was somewhat of a gem. Love that shoe. That shoe.
But do you think then there's a chance that Nike is bringing it back, because now that like you are both relatively like James and you are like relatively elite in my eyes, or like quite on a high professional level runners, and so I assume that you might be not the only ones that are missing that shoe, especially since the idea behind Nike is always innovating better.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are now runners being like, oh, I wish I had the old one.
Yeah.
So,
but if you look at the technology in the shoe, it's something you find in shoes that are now available on the market.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so
why if it is available in the market, why do you still then miss the old shoe?
That's a very good question. I think it's different things. First of all, is that in the end, the people who spend a lot of time running professionally or spending a lot of time on the track as track and field athletes, they're not the majority of the Nike consumers.
No,
right?
they're not.
Nike as a brand needs to make sure that the majority of the running market needs is met through their offerings. So that's the first one, and the second one is it's maybe a little bit of nostalgia also, and
I guess
in the end, they have a very good idea when it comes to the offerings of what needs to be on the market. And we have the Zoom family, we have the Fearless and the Free and the Draw Ride, and all of that together is creating an ecosystem that is supposed to support the athlete's needs. That just does mean that some of the models are not going to live through, but that's okay, because you can find other models that are probably fitting for the needs that you used to have with those shoes. I would say it's probably nostalgia also a little bit.
I guess.
Yeah, it's constant evolution, so it needs to evolve, whether you like it or not. Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
What would be your favorite running shoe at the moment then?
This is a tough
if you
one.
have to pick one.
Yeah. If I would have to pick one, I would pick one that is the most suited for many, many different things, whether it's a sprint session on the track, 10 times 400, or a 15K. And in that sense, I would go with the Pegasus. I think the Pegasus is, to me, still the best all-around shoe. Yeah. If you need one shoe to do it all, it's probably going to be the Pegasus.
The workhorse,
I would go for that one. Yeah.
But since you are
Pegasus or the Pegasus Turbo?
The Pegasus.
The normal one. So this one. Yeah. That's the 37.
The Peg Turbo, I used to love that shoe, but it's also a shoe that is very tailored towards maybe a bit longer distance running. So it's a great shoe to go run a 10K in, for example, which for me is long as endurance running, right? So yeah, I would not do a sprint session, or I would not do like a 200 meter session on the track with the Peg Turbo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were explaining earlier that you are a decathlon athlete, not runner, cannot say that. Is there like a certain discipline that you prefer towards the other ones?
I guess you always tend to like the events that you're a little bit better in than the other ones. So in that sense, I love the high jump. High jump is great because of the feeling if you get of flying a little bit. You're suspended in the air for a fraction of a second. It's quite a beautiful thing. I also love the 400 meter, just because it's all about the mind. No matter who you are, the last 100 and 150 meters, you're going to die. And then you cross the line. Most of the guys cannot even stand on their legs anymore. And it's also good because you finish the first day, so you can go home and rest. And I think, pole vault is also very, very good for sensations. You just fly.
Must be.
Yeah.
And you were saying that you have for every single discipline a different shoe?
Yeah. So now we're moving into something that's very specific. It's track and field spikes.
Yeah.
So this is one example. This one is used for long distance. This one is made for 800 meters all the way up to 3K.
So the Victory you're talking about,
Victory,
for people listening.
The Zoom Victory. So I used those for the 1500 meters. But indeed, you have a very specific spike for sprinting, for the long jump, for the high jump, for the pole vault, for every single event as its own shoe, made and designed for that specific event in mind. Yeah.
Good that you work at Nike.
That makes me want to ask, are you doing Decathlon only as an excuse to buy more shoes? Because let's face it, that's a good excuse.
It is a good excuse, but it's way too tough for it to be the only excuse.
Yeah.
And no, actually, I get a kick out of it
Yeah.
also for other stuff. But at least I have a reason to pack 15 pairs in my bags when I travel. So that's
Jesus.
always a cool thing to do.
Next question is coming from Tim Kekstra, and he asked, what does Nike's research into the impact of shoes on injuries look like?
Yeah.
We actually did discuss this a bit earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the to sum it up to what we discussed before, it's just looking at what used to be pronation-based research and moving towards more stability-like and design when it comes to the foam used. We went through the way that they researched that. So I think
does Nike actually work with? It definitely has 100% its own research labs, but does it also work with universities and stuff, which where then people have more the feeling, okay, they are literally not biased because they're not getting, well, they are still probably getting some money from Nike for doing the research, but I was thinking like they're not directly on the payroll.
No, exactly. So indeed, Nike has its own labs where they test their own thing. But when it comes to really radical statement, like saying, our shoes is making you run 4% faster, or our shoes is making you less prone to injuries, those are research that are made in partnership with research labs, scientists, or universities. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, completely.
Next question from Amanda Fit Guide. Do these fast shoes help when you are not a really fast runner?
Yeah.
So basically when you're not elite or you're just starting, the everyday runners, are those shoes helping? It depends which shoes we are talking about.
Exactly. So I think this question is maybe a little bit more tailored towards the Zoom family, right?
I guess.
The whole Alphafly, Vaporfly thing going on. I think we quickly touched upon that also earlier. What I would say is, do they make you faster? Yes, they do. That's the point, right? Everything is made so that they do make you faster. Now, as a non-elite runner, or as someone who's not running 10K in 30 minutes, do they make you as fast, or is the magnitude of the effect the same for you running 5 minute per kilometer pace, or somebody who's running 2:45? That I don't know, but I also don't think so for the design reason that we explained before. Those shoes are made for people who know how to run very, very well. That's not going to be the case for somebody who's just like a normal runner, or is like a Sunday runner. They don't tend to position their bodies the same way when they run than an elite athlete. So the magnitude of the effect might be a little bit less, but yes, it's still helping a lot. And going back to what we said before, I think if you want to become a faster runner, yes, those shoes are going to help you for sure, but there's also so many different things that you can implement in your program that will help
more
just as
than
well.
the shoe.
Like food, training program,
of
running
course.
form, running efficiency, all of that stuff.
Yeah, people tend to want to be doing the lazy thing. So buying a fast shoe is maybe gonna make me.
It's easier than putting the work in.
Yeah, exactly. Than eating better, going and having enough sleep and everything else. So but that would be a great solution then. It would be easy. A lot of fast runners out there.
And that's a little bit like a pitfall that you should not fall into, right? It's you cannot just blame everything on the shoe.
No, you're the runner. You're the responsible one, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah, and technology just help here to help. So of course,
it's a support. It's a lever. Yeah.
We have a long question from Olaf Kerkhoff that was also here on the podcast. The question is, what if there would be no shoe regulations set by the World Athletic Organization? How would the top Nike marathon shoe be like according to your prediction? So we are talking about Vaporfly and Alphafly then, in that case.
Honestly, I don't know, right? I have to make up something in my mind based on all the design pieces that I've seen before. But if there would be no regulation, I would see a very, very thick shoe, very, very thick sole, packed with that amazing foam that they have. Maybe even like a better version of that foam. I'm not sure if they're working on anything like this, but that could be something. I would also see a lot of airbags, a little bit everywhere, so not just the two that we have. Many carbon plates.
Okay,
I think if you can get like 4 or 5 in there, it would be ideal. So something like that, maybe like a spring or
I think they actually tested that. I saw on somewhere in the videos with Nike that they tested something with springs as well. Yeah.
I think Adidas back in the days, they had this sprinting spike where they also had a somewhat of a spring in it.
Okay.
But that was also then not allowed by the World Athletics. So in a world where everything is possible, I would see a very thick sole packed with amazing foam, and then any levers possible that you can implement in terms of propulsion you forward would be implemented.
So reaching as much as possible this 100% give back energy
until you get on an overboard, and then it's a different sport.
Nice. And that was the last question from the audience. But we still have 2 questions for you, David. Question that we ask all our guests usually here in the studio. And the first question is, if you would be able to give one piece of advice to, I guess, well, in that case, people running, maybe starting running or good runners, what would it be? In that case, I would say, what shoe would you advise? Maybe that's the question we can have here.
Yeah. Again, it really depends on who you are.
Or a general piece of advice, up to you.
And it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? I think if you just want to go out there and run for fun, I would look into the Fearless family or maybe the Pegasus. If you try to race for something, I would look into the Zoom family. And if you ever have the chance to put a Vaporfly, an X% or an Alphafly in your shoes, do it. I think to me, when it comes to choosing the right footwear, it always goes down to feel, right? You need to feel comfortable in the shoe. You need to feel like the feeling that the shoe is giving you is the right one. And for that, if you don't have the chance now to go into a store and actually try them, then you can always order the shoes online. I think Nike has quite a good trial period, so you can actually try the shoes. And after a month, if it doesn't feel like it's the right one for you, you can always send it back. But yeah, the key one would be just make sure you understand the different families and the different offerings and what they were made for.
And be clear about your own purpose that you want to achieve.
Yeah. And then based on that, you can probably have a good selection of product and then just try it and see what feels right for you.
Yeah, that's a nice answer. And our second question is, who should we invite to this show, or what topic are you interested in hearing us talk about? So it could be a person or a topic or a field.
Yeah, no, it's a good one, and you guys already covered quite some different departments within running. I think also if I link it back to the current situation and the whole COVID and working from home and not really being able to live the same way that you did before, I think running can be a way to just connect a little bit with yourself more. And if you're not in a good day for whatever reason because of the context or because you spend the last week at your desk in your living room working, I think I would love to see you guys talk about sports psychology or how to use sport as a lever to feel better as a person beyond the sporting activity itself. I think it's quite important and also quite relevant in today's world.
Yeah. That's
couldn't agree more. Yeah.
There are also like Nike is also doing that. Well, again, what is Nike not doing? Let's say it like that. In the Nike training app, I was recently using that before I had to stop running. There are also quite some headspace runs there as well. So, which I found it's remarkable how quick they are in picking up trends and also or like moving the sport forwards. And
It's great to hear that this is how you feel. I think even more than picking up trends, what we're really trying to do at Nike is we don't want to be the point of contact that you go to if you just need a new pair of shoe, right? The idea with membership is, and the idea of being a Nike member is really that we try to create an ecosystem for the athlete, and by athlete I mean everybody with a body, to create an ecosystem where doesn't matter what you need, you can find it as part of our platform or as part of the Nike journey. So if you need shoes, yes, sure, we have that for you. But if you need to feel good, or if you need, to do some yoga because you're a little bit tense, or if you need to have CrossFit training or training that is going to help your running, for example, we try to have that as well. If you're just not feeling well and you need to go for a run and have somebody from Headspace talking to you, we also try to offer that as well. So it's great to see that it's the way it's received.
Yeah, like it's definitely not, this is a general, now the marketing person inside me talks a little bit, like the general development that we had over the years. In the beginning, we just had the products and we literally put it on the market, people bought it. Yeah. Then they put a nice packaging around it. Then they put like a story around it. And now we are like at this content marketing that is like very popular now, that it's not only the product, but actually offering more value on top of the product that you associate with the company, that you then know, okay, like there I get good advice on top of it, of the product. And then you are also prone to be attracted to their products, or actually understand better what the purpose of certain products are. We talked also with Sabrina recently. She is from Female Performance, and she really focuses on how the female body is different to the male body, and how sport research is taking this part not so much into consideration. And just before we recorded the episode with her, Nike launched the cycle training part in the Nike training app. And I was like, I saw this on Instagram and thought like, oh, Nike, look at you being a forerunner again.
And that's something that I actually forgot to mention. And it's great that you mentioned it, because at least I have the chance to say it. When it comes to the evolution of footwear, so I mentioned that it's going to be more in mass marketed styles, and also in track and field styles and in apparel. But we're also working to make sure we understand the difference in physiology between men and women, and how to bring product that are going to meet the needs of those two. So for example, that's probably something that not many people are familiar with, but a men's Pegasus or a woman's Pegasus, they're not made the same, right? The amount of foam in the sole and the design in itself, you cannot see it if you look at the two shoes, but they're different because they're tailored to the needs of the woman physiology or the men's physiology. So this is also something that I think we're going to see moving forward, where we're really going to see an increase in the amount of resource that is put out there to make sure that we understand what the female top performance needs are, both in terms of product, but also in terms of journey and in terms of membership and all of that, and try to meet those needs as best as we can.
Yeah, we were mentioning that in our pre-talk before you were telling that you are working in the product department and in the female product department. So I was back then in that conversation saying like, oh, what is the difference with both female product department besides selecting some more female colors? And that was the point that you explained to me, that there is really this difference in the amount of foam and where things that I would not think about.
Yeah, it's not just a smaller shoe.
Yeah.
It's not just a smaller shoe in a different color. It's much more than that.
And I would even argue that the color is becoming less and less important. You can see now that, pink colorways, for example, is working really well with men's.
Glad that you brought that up, because I don't know when it was, Berlin Marathon a couple of years ago. As all running crews, we follow each other, and the Kraft runners were running with the new, I think it was a Vaporfly back then, in pink. I think it was, this one actually,
next,
this one.
Exactly.
In pink. And this, if I had to get a shoe now, I would get this one just for this pink, fluo pink that I love so much.
No,
amazing
exactly.
color.
And the Craft Runner crew is a really, really nice crew. Like
they're amazing.
We work a lot with them together, and they're great guys. But yeah, exactly to that point, I think color is becoming less and less of an important decision factor when it comes to gender decision. And this is just me talking now. It's not on behalf of Nike, but I actually, I don't believe in colorways for gender. I just think that they should almost be the same for all of them. Like I don't believe that blue is the color for men and that pink is the color for women. And you see that actually switching around quite well. I'd love to see more focus on what are the actual needs when it comes to the design and the foam and the lacing and all of that versus it's women, so let's go pink and turquoise. Like no, I think we're past that. Yeah,
nice. Thank you very much, David. I'm dying here.
Thank you very much for coming over. I think we learned a lot there. Like. Especially when you're not a nerd like me, there was a very eye-opening conversation where things were discussed and brought on the table where I was like, this is amazing that this is taken into consideration and that there are like these changes made or innovations are. So again, thanks very much for your time. If people are more curious to find out about everything that we talked about and like Nike, well, that we have to say it, I think we don't, but like still like go to all the social media channels, go on the internet, looked at Nike Running to really focus on the running series, and Nike Woman about everything that I just said recently, where, for example, also the cycle training was launched.
Yeah, all the amazing apps also, the Run Club, the Training Club, the Nike, the Sneakers app, all these apps as well, the website. It's all there.
Go in the App Store and put Nike and then you'll find all of it.
Yes. Thanks for all the knowledge. Thank you for your time. And looking forward to chat with you again in the future and see what's next.
Yeah, see these NDA planes that you can't talk about yet.
So thanks for having me. It's always good to share those things. It's always great to I think to make people understand better what the shoes are about and what they can get out of it. So pleasure.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you all for listening and watching again. You guys can follow our adventure on Instagram and Facebook. And that's pretty much it. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube for the video version of this podcast. And we hope to catch you guys in the next one. See you. Bye.
Bye.